A while back, an analytics company by the name of Mixpanel published a report analyzing 572 products and 50 billion events. In their research, they found that the top 10% of products outperformed the average by nearly 100% when it comes to retention. That's a massive difference that trickles right down to revenue. So what's the difference? If we superimpose the two graphs on top of each other, we see it pretty clearly. The slopes are basically identical. What's different is what happens in week 1, and that's user onboarding. Now, for a talk that's supposed to blow your mind, I'm probably not off to a great start. You're here because you already know that user onboarding is important. Pundits have been telling us that for years. What they haven't yet told us is how to do it, how to create a remarkable user experience. That's what I'll try to do today. I'm Jonathan Kim, co-founder and CEO of a company in Boston called Appcues. Now, conventional wisdom has told us that delivering an incredible user experience is hard, it's time-consuming, and it's expensive. Appcues makes that simple, fast, and affordable, and we've been doing that for some of the best companies out there. In fact, odds are that many of you have already seen Appcues and haven't yet realized it. We power the user experience for over 1,000 software products, many of which are tools you use every day. So we know a thing or two about onboarding. One of the things we know about onboarding is that it's something that most companies struggle with. Whether because they misunderstand it or don't execute properly, there's just a lot of confusion. We also know that if done well, effort put into improving onboarding can have an outsized effect on a business. Mature, highly optimized companies like AdRoll, Canva, and Yotpo have been able to see major gains with even just simple improvements. And by working with those types of companies, we've developed our own framework for how to do onboarding really well. It's called EMBED. The first is establishing alignment. Have you already tried to pitch an onboarding project at your company? Getting the team, especially your executive team, aligned to the importance of this will be a challenge if you don't prepare well. The good news is that everyone knows what a good or bad onboarding experience looks like. They know what it feels like. Surface that reality to your team to at least build a shared awareness. And at the very least, the quality of your onboarding experience should be a choice, not an accident. That includes the non-product interactions your customers have with sales, marketing, and support. In an ideal case, delivering exceptional customer experience is a cultural value. If that's not the case, you can at least do work to make it a strategic imperative. My favorite way to do this is with data. Marketing and sales spend so much time and effort getting people to use a product, but the vast majority try it and never come back. Here in this graph, we're looking at the impact of a 25% increase in activation on revenue, which is that blue chunk. If we reinvested the gains we get from more efficient marketing, this graph will grow even faster. If you can't convince them with data, scope things back to at least try something small. Oftentimes there are easy wins that, if proven successful, can make the case for bigger improvements. Before moving on to any of the next steps, you'll also want to establish your baseline metrics. If you found that it's hard to convince people the first time around, it'll be even harder if you don't show results. Once you establish alignment, you'll want to map out your user journey. That's the second step in the framework. Like with establishing alignment, aim to include every touchpoint your customers may have with your brand. This one is Disney's marketing strategy from 1957. That's over 60 years ago. Two important points along that user journey are your aha moment and your activation moment. An aha moment is the point at which users find delight in your product. An activation moment is when users first receive the value that they were promised. Great user experiences include both. Let's look at an example from a popular ride-sharing app, Lyft. Activation for Lyft isn't when you download their app or even when you request a ride. Activation is when you successfully arrive at your destination without all of the fuss that used to come with traditional taxis. They also have a unique aha moment, when you get in the car and see a hand extending to give you that fist bump. Now that we know what journey we want to take our users on, it's time to brainstorm ideas of how to make that happen. Now, this can seem like a really overwhelming process at first, but it doesn't have to be. A great place to start is by turning to patterns that are already familiar to users, things like welcome messages, guided tours, and checklists. These are great foundations from which to build upon. Once you get more advanced, you can also lean on researched principles of user psychology. Here we have the goal grading effect, which says that our efforts will increase as we get closer to a goal. Or the choice paradox, right? Narrowing down decisions to help users make decisions faster. Or the commitment and consistency principle, which helps users make commitments that are in line with their previous selves. And I can go on. There's familiarity bias, gamification, the peak end rule. My favorite. There's tons of them to try and explore whenever you're ready. Great. We've established alignment, mapped our user journey, and also have some great ideas. Now it's time to execute. As you go through this process, keep in mind that it's not always the hardest things that will have the biggest impact. In fact, sometimes it's the simplest. Here's an example from one of our customers, AdRoll, who with a really simple introduction about a feature was able to massively change their adoption. Sometimes it's also the counterintuitive things. In using our own product and analyzing our own data, we found that publishing a flow, a core part of the Appcues experience, actually did not correlate that strongly to retention. Activating an integration or inviting another user to your account had a much higher correlation to retention than publishing a flow. As you go through this process, just keep an open mind, continue to try things, and work through your list of ideas. The last step in the framework is do it again. Improving any part of your product should be an iterative process, not a one-time project. Take the lessons you've learned and use them to make even bigger bets, make better user experiences. Now, I promised I would blow your mind in this presentation, so I want to share 2 insights that I've learned along the way in creating EMBED. These are things that I believed early on and even recommended to others, but sadly, they just aren't true. The first is that all products should be intuitive. It turns out that companies like Apple, Snapchat, and Uber also struggle with user experience and explaining their products in an intuitive way. And it's because all products and all businesses have at least 2 types of customers. You can break that down into low spenders and high rollers, new users versus existing users, savvy versus non-savvy customers. Any product that is optimized only for one is missing out on a group of another. Warby Parker, for instance, is a company that makes glasses for both men and women. Now, they could use some fancy technology to try to predict whether a user is looking for men's frames or women's frames, but instead they just ask. That information helps them personalize the next experience after that. The next myth is that less is more. Again, something we advocated for. Here we see the number of Appcues flows by length. The overwhelming majority of flows are 1 to 2 steps. It turns out that there's actually no correlation between the length of an onboarding experience and the completion rate. When we looked at the data, 14-step flows actually had the highest completion rates, nearly 50%. Now, that doesn't mean that all flows should be 14 steps, but shorter is not universally better. Hopefully that blew your mind. Thank you for watching. I'm Jonathan Kim from Appcues. If you want to learn more, go to appcues.com and definitely check out our User Onboarding Academy. If you want to find me on Twitter, I'm Hi Jonathan.